In March of 1988, Commissioner Rodney J. Long was elected Gainesville's first single-member district commissioner. He was re-elected to a second term in March of 1991. In May of 1991, he was chosen by his colleagues to serve as Gainesville's first district mayor commissioner. In November 2000, Commissioner Long was elected to serve on the Alachua County Commission, becoming the first African American to serve on both the city and county commissions. He recently announced that he would not be seeking another term on the county commission. Welcome, Rodney.
Thanks, Mark. Glad to be with you.
Seems fitting somehow that we've interviewed you many times over the years, and some people don't know that you were the originator of Alachua County Talks way before my time at the county, so very happy that you came to see us today.
Well, Mark, I'm happy to be here with you today, and I'm happy to see that Alachua County Talks has survived all the different things over the years, including budget cuts.
That's right.
That is still surviving.
It's been tight, but we're still here. Why don't we go back 30 some years ago? I know there was a time in your life when you felt a calling for public service, and I remember it manifested in a lot of special projects even before you ran for elected office. Can you tell me about some of the community projects that you were involved in before that first run on the City Commission?
Be glad to, because it's very vivid in my mind. You know, when you look at 32 years of civic and public service dating back to 1978, I was a part business owner in a business locally called Music Express of Gainesville, which eventually went on to own radio stations and nightclubs. My involvement was more of civic and how we got involved in doing things civically in the community. And I kind of got the basis for doing that from growing up. I always wanted to be involved in doing things, and in church I always wanted to be in plays, take the leading roles. I was given a real gifting of talking, so I figured I could pretty much talk myself into things. If I got in trouble, I can always talk myself out. So I just had this gift of real gab and real talk. But when I got into this business venture, one of the reasons that I was hired and given a part ownership of the business was because of the creative ideas that I had and the planning skill sets and those things that I could do in bringing forth collaboratives and making things work from a vision to paper to reality. So I was the person who planned many of the promotional things for the community. The first major event that we did as a business was what we call the Musical Fair, which was after the homecoming parade in 1978. And the reason we did that was we wanted to work with the University of Florida and the local community in terms of celebrating an activity following the parade, right, which mainly engaged and involved the African American community, because there was really no real outreach for the African American community. So in planning, we worked with the City of Gainesville, the University of Florida, Blue Key, and those entities to put together this program on the plaza, which is now the Bo Diddley Plaza. And we had about 4,000 or 5,000 people after the parade. And we had Albert the Alligator, we had the University of Florida cheerleaders, we had proclamations, and that was the beginning for me of started doing civic activities. And then one thing led to another. We would do activities for the youth in the community. Every Easter weekend, we would do what was called the Sportathon, where we would go out to the local high schools and middle schools and provide activities for them. And at Lincoln Middle School, we would have the big events, track and field, basketball, and just doing things for the community. And that kind of started, and that snowball kept going to getting involved with civic organizations and youth athletics and the NAACP. I served as executive secretary for the NAACP for like 4 years. I founded the Martin Luther King Commission in 1984, which led to the commemoration and celebration of King activities up until this day.
Now, when you were at UF, you actually organized an MLK march.
I organized the first march in the city of Gainesville in 1982 while attending the University of Florida, and that march was from the University of Florida Plaza of Americas to the downtown plaza. And the University of Florida had started long ago commemorating the birthday of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and that was started by the late Bill Simmons, who was the director of the Institute of Black Culture. And I wanted to figure out a way, how could we tie in what was going on at the University of Florida to the community, because the community at that time was really not celebrating Dr. King at all. And because his birthday was not even a national holiday until 1986 when it was proclaimed. So from the period of 82 up until the time we began celebrating him locally, I worked with the University of Florida Institute of Black Culture and the radio station that I was involved with, and Music Express, the business I was involved with, and we organized the first march for Martin Luther King from the Plaza of America to the downtown plaza. And it's been an annual event since 1982.
One of the things that I've loved about working with you over the last 12 years is you have such a good sense of media and communications and marketing and public relations, and you've got a real flair for bringing people together, shining a spotlight on issues that you feel are important. But to go back a step, then there came a time when you considered running for the Gainesville City Commission. What year was that?
Well, it was 1987, late 87, early 88, and it was something that I was reluctant to do because I really liked what I was doing. I was involved with a lot of civic activities, youth athletics. I was serving on numerous boards of the city and county advisory board, and then I was the executive director of the NAACP. So I really wasn't interested in getting involved in elected office because I believed that it was important for me at the time to stay engaged outside the system, because I could then deal with the system from different entry points. And by getting involved in the system, I thought it was going to be very, very limited to me. But it was after I initiated on behalf of the NAACP the whole issue of single member districts by way of the NAACP. And in 1986, the voters voted in single member districts for the city of Gainesville, and the first seat, which was District 1, was going to be elected 2 years later in 1988. So in late 1987, I began to become approached by individuals to run for office, and I really thought about it. I just got married in November of '87, so I really wasn't interested in jumping right into the fray of politics. But in January of 1988, I declared a candidacy. It was a three-way race, and in March of 1988, I won by the slimmest margin in the history of the city of Gainesville in a three-way race. 50.14% of the electorate voted for me as the first district commissioner, and I've been engaged in elected politics on and off since 1988.
So you joined the city commission, and what were some of the issues at that time that you were dealing with, or that you feel proud of having been a part of?
Well, at first I was the issue on the Gainesville City Commission, and I guess, you know, when I look back on it, I think that, and I used to always reference sometime in my comments Ronald Reagan in terms of what is it you need in order to be in politics, and he would always say you need a Teflon coating. And as I've said in my retirement speech, I never even knew what that was, but it really sounded good. And what I did was, before I even got in office, I created a big stir. And the big stir was whether or not I wanted to be able to park my car behind and underneath the overhang at City Hall, or if I wanted to have my car out front so my constituents and people would know when I was in office, because you never could tell whether or not people were in office. So I decided that I want to have my car parked out front. So I wanted a reserved parking space. Hadn't even gotten sworn in at the time, but you know, I demanded and was given a parking space. And boy, did I get into a hornet's nest when that happened. You know, I was ridiculed and actually editorialized upon, and was called arrogant and all the different things. But I didn't necessarily see it as a point of arrogance. And what I wanted to try to convey to my constituents was that I'm here for business. I'm open. Whenever you see my car, you really don't need an appointment. Just come in, and if I'm not busy, just come right in and we can talk. And that was the whole inference of doing that. But others took it out of context and thought it was something else and thought I was arrogant, which I was not. And it really worked, because if you fast forward to today, all the city commissioners park in front of City Hall. So being a visionary, as I sometimes say I am, and because I can see things, it would just happen to be that I was the beginning one to do something in a trailblazer, and that would happen. And that was the beginning of what I would say, building that Teflon coating that's needed in politics to be able to withstand criticism. And when I look at my term as a district commissioner coming into the district, I was the only commissioner for 2 years that really had a true constituency. And all of us, you know, were elected and everybody paid your salary, but none of us had a true constituency that we can define politically to be elected to office. I was the first for 2 years. And coming from District 1, all of the issues and problems, major problems that were facing the city was in District 1. whether it was the lack of infrastructure, lack of recreational activities, high crime rates, and with lack of economic opportunities, whatever they were already there in District 1, and they had been there for years. And mind you, that was one of the reasons why the voters in this city voted for a single member district, because they wanted to make sure that at least minorities had an opportunity to access the political system. Because prior to that, there had only been three African Americans elected citywide.
Right.
But in 1986, we believed that it was time for us to change, to make sure that we've had minority access. And by having that, you can have a person that you can hold accountable to make sure that those things that you need in the district, same thing you do with legislators and congressional people today, you were doing with the city commission back then. And I was fortunate to be able to serve in that capacity, and we had a very interesting makeup of commissioners at that time. And mind you, I've had the opportunity to serve with several of them on the county commission from the days of the city commission. My colleague Cynthia McChesnut, and I served with her. She was the first African American mayor to serve on the city. Paula Delaney had an opportunity to serve with her. As a matter of fact, when Paula was first elected, I mentored Paula. She sat next to me.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, I had an opportunity to try to teach her the ropes of how city government worked, and did it for a couple of years before I actually left. I think she came on in 92, I left in 94. So, and when you look at those things and the issues that we had a lot of success. We were able to get cops teams in those areas that had high crime, incidents of crime.
For those that don't know what COPS is.
Yeah, community-oriented policing, where you have the police officers work basically in an area, and they actually patrol that area and provide that area with the needs, and the people in the community in that area know who those officers are. So it makes policing easier in those areas. And we were able to reduce the waiting list for housing rehabilitation from 11 years to the current year by putting more block grant dollars into those areas. And I was able to start laying some of the groundwork for some of the things that are positive today. For example, the Porter's Recreation Center used to be owned by the Bridge House by the county. As a matter of fact, I was able to convince the county to give it to the city for $1, and we built Porter's Oaks there. And of course, the Porter's Oaks development that's there now, Porter's Oaks 1 and Porter's Oaks 2. I was on the commission when we developed and built those affordable housing developments in that area. And when you begin to start looking at things holistically, we made a lot of progress in that area. One of the controversies back then was the creation of community redevelopment areas.
Right.
You know, CRAs. I was very fortunate to create the Pleasant Street 5th Avenue one, and was a part of the pushing and promoting the downtown one.
Right.
And, you know, they don't immediately provide the bang that you really want, but over a period of time and decades they do. And if you look at the CRAs today downtown, in College Park, even with the expansion of the one in East Gainesville, they have been very, very successful, and they're going to be very, very successful, and they're victims of their success.
Right.
So we were able to do some of those types of things, and eventually, while serving on the city commission, I probably had one of the worst experiences in my lifetime to occur to me while sitting in public office.
Do you want to go into any detail about that?
It was, you know, in 1993, August 11, 1993 to be exact, I was indicted by a federal grand jury for the charge of sale and possession of crack cocaine from 1970s up until the time I was serving on the city commission at the time. And in being indicted, it was like, you know, your whole world is upside down. The federal government indicts you. And at that time, the city of Gainesville was under an entire cloud of suspicion for kickbacks and bribes. And none of those things actually proved to be true. And all the allegations that were against then City Manager White were found not to be true. And City Hall was in a shambles. And of all of that, what was actually came out to be a criminal charge was my criminal past and those things that I had done when I was younger, in my younger days, and I was indicted. Nothing to do by my elected office,
right.
Nothing to do while I was sitting in office. As a matter of fact, when I was actually acquitted 6 months to the day, February 11, 1994, people began to wonder what was it all about.
Right.
And I was acquitted, went through 2 federal trials, cost me 6 figures in attorney's fees, lost my license for bail. I mean, I got, you know, removed from office. So it was one of those humiliating things you do. But, you know, I look at it as positive. Those things that God put you through, he put you in a position to be able to come back stronger, to be able to clean you up, if you will, for other things that he has for you in life. And I came back, was reinstated back in office in February 1994, and Finished my term in May of 1994, and for the next 6 years, I went back to doing what I was doing before I was elected to the City Commission.
And before we get to exactly how you rebounded, one thing, was the MLK Center, was that done during your tenure?
During my tenure on the City Commission, a couple of things that we laid the groundwork for that did not come to fruition until after I left the commission. One of those things, one of those things was the funding for the MLK Center. I lobbied for the funding for the MLK Center, and it came on after I left. The other thing is, and which is very, very important because it's significant to where Walmart Supercenter is today. One of the major pushes that I had back then was the development of Cedar Grove 2, which is the housing development, 144 units. That's out there fully completed today. At the time, people thought I was crazy. When I asked to get money, lobbied the federal government, got the money for the city of Gainesville to do all the drainage and redo all the roads and replatted the subdivision. And in doing that, I knew that at some point in time, if we had another access road coming out of Cedar Grove to Waldo Road, then the property on the front of Waldo Road could become marketable for business development. Now, at the time when this was going on, there were two property owners who owned all the frontage of property on Waldo Road. One was named Dickerson and one was Roy Camp. Roy Camp, after years of convincing him that he needed to buy the property and have total site control over the entire property and to give us an easement for the road, which he eventually did. He bought the property, gave us an easement. And I said, now hold on to this property because one day it's going to be very valuable. And it was very, very valuable because Walmart Supercenter bought the property years later and developed Walmart Supercenter. And then now that we have commercial rezoning there for the other things that'll go along to start the real push and turn, which, coming back to the county commission, put in play all of the other things to plan East Gainesville and the Waldo Road Corridor study, which those things I've worked on since I've been on the county commission, in the continuation of those things that I started when I was on the city commission. So
thank you for that excellent segue. The year 2000 is coming up, and you've made a decision at some point to run for the Alachua County Commission.
Charles Chestnut III was in office at the time. And I was very involved with youth athletics, track and field, basketball, had my own businesses. So really I wasn't, and my kids were, in middle school, going to high school. So I really wasn't interested in getting in politics. But I had Tom Coward, former county commissioner, and Charles Chestnut to both talk to me about the possibility of running for the seat. I had never run for anything outside of District 1, never ran for a citywide election before, less more a countywide election. And prior to that, I had been courted about running for the mayor's seat in 1998. Even the media and those had put me and Paula Delaney up against the, running, and I wasn't ready to re-enter back in politics because I was still in this transition piece from what had happened, trying to restructure, rebuild my career, rebuild my life, rebuild my businesses, reconnect with my children, and somewhat trying to get your reputation in life back that was taken from you years before. So I really wasn't ready to get back into public office. And I didn't make the decision until probably February or March of 2000. To actually run for the seat. And it was a whole new experience running for a county-wide office. Certainly you don't know who the real players are. I mean, there's so many different constituencies and there's so many different issues there. And county government, as you learn over a period of time, as I've learned over a period of time, every county government is ground zero from the federal up from the local, and everything rests on county government shoulders. I didn't really understand county government, but after getting in county government and being involved with FAC and NACO and those things, I learned how to do the job, but I didn't understand then. But I built constituencies and built collaborations and got elected after 3 elections in 2000, a primary, a runoff, then a general election. I ran 3 elections in 2000 and was able to win, and I've run successfully in 2004 and again in 2008.
Yeah, here we are, 12 years, almost 12 years into your third term on the county commission. We never have enough time on this show, but there are so many things that stand out, at least in my mind, that happened during your tenure. I mean, there have been a number of buildings built and more dollars put into road maintenance than in the previous 10 years before you came to the commission. One thing that I know is near and dear to your heart, though, is poverty reduction. And there were a number of initiatives that you championed for the commission. Can you tell me a little bit about those?
county government under Chapter 125 really being an extension of the state, your main focus is social services, hospitals, health departments, dealing with those persons who are probably the least fortunate in your community, those who need affordable housing, the elderly and homeless and hunger. And I have a real passion for that. I've always had a passion for that. Even when I was on the city commission, I chaired the relocation of the new St. Francis House, which eventually built in the same location. So I've always had a passion for the least fortunate in this community. And in getting involved with the homeless issue, it was always pushed that it was the city's responsibility. It's the city's responsibility. And I, at the time, I convinced my colleagues, wait a minute, these people that we're talking about, they're citizens of Alachua County. We cannot put the responsibility solely on the backs of city government just because most of the people who consider themselves to be homeless congregate downtown. We need to get more involved. And in 2003, I convinced my colleagues that we need to get involved. And I asked then Mayor Peggy hand in hand if she would join in with me, and we will host a summit and bring every stakeholder that we could possibly think of in this community with the purpose of hopefully putting together a 10-year plan that will begin to eradicate homelessness. This started in 2003. And in 2005, we were able to successfully complete the plan, but every stakeholder we could think of came in and we created a plan, one of 200 plans in the United States of America, and now we have a 10-year plan. And the centerpiece of the plan that the city of Gainesville is working on right now is hopefully the actual construction of the Grace Marketplace, which is the one-stop center, we're calling it right now, for homelessness. And to me, knowing that we got a plan in place that would eventually deal with this issue, and to be quite honest with you, that particular one-stop center, even the things that we're doing are not going to be enough because the situations from 2005 have changed dramatically in 2011 going into 2012.
Right.
And the other issue we dealt with that's very important to me is how we deal with hunger in Alachua County, especially young people, young children. 1 out of 4 young people in our community are hungry every single day. And there's been several reports, even on, on CBS just a couple of weeks ago. On 60 Minutes, they did a follow-up and report about hunger kids in the United States of America. So to me, finding a way that we can eliminate hunger in this community and working through poverty reduction through John Skelly and others and bringing stakeholders to the table. I've reached out again to then Mayor Peggy hand in hand if she would work with me again and having another summit, bringing to the table those individuals so we can put together a hunger abatement plan that will begin to eliminate and eradicate hunger in Alachua County. And since that was about 4 years ago, and every year to actually bring attention in the month of November and the focus on hunger, I've had a hunger food drive that we've had every year to strike out hunger in Alachua County. And this year being the year that we've had the most success, where we've actually raised 67,000 pounds of food this particular year, more so than we've done before. And with that, we've been able to build upon that. So not just raising non-perishable goods, but this year I added another component, and that was giving away over 500 Thanksgiving baskets to needy families, which we were able to accomplish. We gave 562 this year. So those kinds of things have always been very, very important to me. Dealing with people who are the less fortunate, whether it's ex-felon reentry that I'm very, very involved in, been very, very involved with since I've been on the commission, or trying to remove those persons from our jail that are mentally ill.
Right.
So those have been the issues under the poverty reduction things that I've been very, very interested and very, very passionate about.
Again, I always wish I had more time here, but during your tenure, the county has built the new criminal justice courthouse, 2 new fire stations, a senior center out near the highway patrol. We're in the process of building Kanapaha Recreation Center now. The Alachua County Forever program has put more land into the land conservation kind of treasury that we have here in town. Choices Health Services brought health care to the working uninsured. Fire stations, I think I mentioned it, have been built. But there are a couple things that we're just down to the last few minutes here, and I know that you were just such an integral part of Plan East Gainesville. Can you touch on that effort for me just a little bit? As
a member of the Metropolitan Transportation Planning Organization, MTPO, we had began discussions about East 16th Avenue, the Connector Road, Boulevard Road. And to me, it was a road to nowhere. And to me, it wasn't the issue about that. But the issue to me about East Gainesville at the time was, how do we make sure, one, we protect the environmental pristine things that we want to protect? And how do we provide economic opportunity in those areas that have been deprived? And I was able to convince my colleagues to create a subcommittee called the Plan East Gainesville Subcommittee to come up with a planning document that would be the blueprint for change, not only to protect those things that are environmentally sensitive, but to look at our road and transportation network and economic development. So I chaired that since 2005, and it's still ongoing now. And we came up with a planning document that had a lot of stakeholders, the University of Florida, the city and the county, I mean, numerous stakeholders and individuals who own businesses and lived in the area. And we got a document that the city and the county have approved, placed into the comprehensive plan. The county has moved forward on those things it needs to do. The centerpiece was to develop the current existing fairgrounds into a commerce center. But in order to do that, we had to purchase land somewhere else so we wouldn't be in violation of the reverter clause for the state of Florida Division of Land. So we purchased a tract of land, about 150 acres north of the existing fairgrounds, which was the Weisman tract, we call it, for the future relocation of the fairgrounds, which will free up the existing fairgrounds for the commercial development part, which is the #1 centerpiece of that. And we were also able to work with the city of Gainesville, the county, and the University of Florida to jointly fund and study the Waldo Road corridor, which is the biggest corridor in East Gainesville, which has the most promise, to develop strategies to implement the Plan East Gainesville. The University of Florida has been the bedrock for future development on the eastern part of the Waldo Road corridor. They've already completed about a $12 million construction already of one of his services building. Another $16 million building is currently under construction now. So the public sector has done what it needs to do. The city of Gainesville has moved forward to make sure that all of the land uses and the density, including the CRA overlay, is along the entire Waldo Road corridor and the county's existing fairgrounds. So the public sector has done what it needs to do. Now it's time for the private sector to begin. And one of the things that I'm going to do when I leave the county is I'm going to go back into the private sector and encourage the private sector to begin to invest on the Waldo Road corridor. I think it's important. And those are the kinds of things that I cannot do without the perception of a conflict of interest sitting on the county commission. So that's one of the things that I want to do when I go back into the private sector.
Well, that's a great note to end on, what you've kind of left in place and how the future might look soon. And a great deal of that is due to your efforts.
Thank you very much. Just before we leave, I think to me, and what people don't know about me is that I am a man of faith, and I am driven by faith. And as I begin to leave county government, there are a lot of work that I'm called to do, and a lot of it is those same things that I am passionate about. So one of the things that I'm going to do is I'm going to be accepting my calling into the ministry, that I'm going to go forth and to make sure that those persons who are still least fortunate, those persons who are left behind, to become the voice and the advocate for those. So that to me, that is the highest calling that I believe that any person can have, and it's even a higher calling than where I sit today. I mean, I've gone to the White House and I've done different types of things. As you know, I've been president of the Florida Association of Counties and served on national board. All that's fine, but that to me is not more important than doing the work of God and to help God's people.
Well, Rodney, best of luck to you.
Thank you, Mark.
Yeah, thank you for being
Appreciate
here.
it.